Welcome to the Fintech Power50 series of webinars. My name is Mark Walker and I'm the co-founder. The Fintech Power50 is the annual guide to the most influential, innovative and powerful figures in the fintech industry, shining a spotlight on those who are transforming financial services for the better. We have a great group of people for today's discussion. So I'm going to invite them all to join me on screen and start by asking each of them to give us a short introduction of who they are and the company they're representing.
Yeah, I'm Ed from Bottom Line. I run a function we call strategic business development. So we're looking at sort of 12 months plus what's happening in the industry, and then bringing the ideas to the table to see where we might invest as an active fintech. We're publicly quoted, we're servicing banks and corporates around the world. And my own background, I'm 25 years in payments. So I've seen quite a few things come and go, and certainly this particular topic of open banking is a major focus for us. So delighted to be here today.
Perfect. We're delighted to have you. Craig, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Polly. Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Ordo. My background, I was formerly the CEO of the Faster Payment Scheme in the UK for a number of years. And in 2018, myself and some of my management team established Ordo as a fintech to really bring faster payments and open banking to build an open banking payments platform. We partnered with CGI, a global technology business, and we've got investment from Nationwide Building Society Ventures. And we've had a live platform delivering payment solutions for the last 15 months or so. And we deliver open banking alternatives for e-commerce, bill payment, and even face-to-face payment with QR codes. We're focused in the UK at the moment because that's where, frankly, open banking has got the most traction, but we have plans to expand into Europe with PSD2 and also plans to expand our proposition with things like real-time debits. We've got some great partners, CGI, Qantas, Sage we work with, and Siemens, where we're doing some interesting work at the moment. So that's me and Ordo.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Helen.
Thank you, Polly, for inviting me, and thank you for putting on what is going to be an exciting conversation. I'm the co-founder of Open Banking Excellence, OBE as we affectionately call it, and we are a global community of fintechs, big techs, banks, regulators and service providers. And our purpose is to enable our community to connect, to collaborate, an absolute key word for us, and to innovate, and to maximize the impact and the growth of the sector. So we are all around creating exceptional platforms to allow and promote new thinking and knowledge sharing. And so it's particularly an exciting time for us at OBE. We're about to launch in Brazil, where there's a lot going on there. But it's particularly interesting as open banking moves into open finance and open data. It's a phenomenally exciting time for us all to get our fintech mojo on.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again for everyone to join me today. I'm so excited to hear what insights you're all going to share with us. So why don't we kick off with the first question. Helen, I'm going to come to you first. So what have been the big success stories of open banking?
Gosh, there are so many. So prior to actually coming on this panel, I asked Giovanni, who is he's the head of blog content, and he's actually, I'm going to be very proud now, so he's the first guy to have a PhD in open banking, so we can have that authoritative conversation. I asked him just to give me a few stats to share. I think one of the success stories, and there are many, but one of them is the growth that we have had. So let's just look at where we've come from. So these are from 2021 in April. So we have now got 311 regulated providers made up of 226 TTPs and 85 account providers with 113 regulated entities. All of those, like the guys that you've just heard from, all of those have at least one live application. Okay, so that is phenomenal given where we started from a flat base. And where did we start? Okay, and I think that's one of the success stories. And particularly given our place in the ecosystem, what I get invited is to advise a lot of regulators around the world, because they look, and we should all be immensely proud of this. Everybody looks at the UK for lessons learned. If you look at the Finnerton report, we created the blueprint for open banking. Yes, there was screen scraping in the States and other parts of the world before, but we should be very proud of the fact that, you know, we did create the blueprint for open banking. Doesn't mean we got everything right. It means that we do have an absolute depth of knowledge to share. So some other phenomenal facts. If you look at the growth of the API calls, so if we look at 2018, we did 66.8 million API calls. And now in 2020, a phenomenal 6 billion. And that is a number that should really innovate everybody to continue to create more exciting applications and to continue that improving of the UX. And I think the improving of the UX is just one other success story. So I think what I'm really saying is that the biggest success story is us as a whole, as a sector, in how we have grown up, okay, how we have, we are now in the early majority stage, we're not at the early adoption stage. At the beginning, when we had our first OBE, our first campfire, we did a good, the bad and the ugly, and it was the UX, and you had to go through 10 different screens to make something happen, which now is just intuitive, okay? And the UX, I think, is much improved. And hats off to the OBIE for stepping in to sort out some design standards, and the CMA 9, and the FCA. We should actually thank the FCA for creating an environment that inspires innovation. So I would say those are some of the phenomenal success stories. But if I had to point to one that is very sort of relevant, so we like to be red hot relevant at OBE, that is relevant for this conversation, it would be Captain Tom. And if you just think of what that incredible man did, and then if you think he raised 30 million, of which the majority was collected through open banking payments. The general public don't need to know that. We're a utility, it's plumbing, but that just speaks to where we are now on the growth trajectory. And it's an exciting growth trajectory as we move into open finance. So hopefully those numbers, Polly, will just set a little bit of the context for what is, an amazing sector full of entrepreneurs and people that want to make exciting stuff happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Those numbers were fascinating. And I think it's really interesting what you said about Captain Tom. Obviously, it gives a real life connection to open banking payments, which, like you say, regular people wouldn't necessarily even know about. So I just wanted to come to you then, Craig. What technical advances have we seen in open banking?
I think it links into the comments that Helen was making, and certainly connecting these two questions. To me, one of the big success stories of open banking, in particular my area of interest, which is open banking payments, is in the UK, we have made what is technically an incredibly complex piece of technology and architecture simple. And that is the goal. When I do demonstrations of the auto service to customers, I almost have to slow things down because it just happens too quickly and too easily. And I think the technical advances are both the initial work done by the open banking implementation entity to give us a common and ubiquitous approach has worked both for TPPs like ourselves and also for banks, account and servicing PSPs to give a common approach. That coordination of the technology standards and then the user experience standards has been profoundly important. And that over the last 18 months, we've worked with a whole host of banks who I have to say all want to make this work. And as we test and validate journeys, we find customer type X doesn't quite work for this reason. We found banks tremendously responsive to our requests and to fix things, to give this ubiquitous experience. So I think the technical advances were made in the early days by a fantastic design, which has been implemented and operated very effectively now. I think the other piece is something that's particular to the UK, because open banking was designed hand in glove with the faster payments scheme, which is the underlying payments entity. All the great features of that scheme, which is 24/7 capability, irrevocable payments in real time, have been fully delivered through the APIs from open banking, so that every feature you want out of that is available to third parties to add value to. So when you make an open banking payment, it's not as the case you might say perhaps in parts of Europe at the moment where, yeah, the request has been sent and it might get processed in due course and we might let you know when it's gone through. When you get told by open banking in the UK that your payment has happened, the money is in the destination account. Not probably, but absolutely. And I think taking all those business features that allow players like us and bottom line to add value to them and package them up in a way that works very effectively, that is the big technical advance. almost as technical as is, it just works as it should do.
Yeah, brilliant. And then coming to you, Ed, sort of carrying on this conversation, how does this affect consumers?
Well, in some ways, they shouldn't even notice. That's the fun thing about this. This is underneath this. This, in my mind, is one of the biggest changes that banking has actually ever had and accommodated in this digital world. And yes, there's a lot of hyperbole around, but there really is a significant change that can help the consumer have faster decisions, more informed decisions, safer decisions. So we're spending a lot of time at the moment on confirmation of payee in the UK. Now, people think, oh, that's a kind of anti-fraud thing to stop a particular type of fraud, check who you're paying, the beneficiary name. But underneath, it's powered by open banking. Now, the consumer, when they make a payment, doesn't think about open banking when it says, are you sure that's the name you want? And is it a match? Is it a no match? Is it a partial match? And we just put that little bit of grit in the system to make sure that no fraudster has taken the money and redirected it. But it's a better, safer experience for the consumer. And then you can apply it to business, whether it's COP checks to reduce fraud, or whether it's real-time information that we can pull out of the data pools through open banking. So, for example, with cash flow, we have a lot of conversations with treasurers where they can have real-time cash flow from multiple sources populated onto their screen so that the decisions are better informed and up to date. So the beauty here is the application is wide, it's huge. The challenge is to focus in on the best use cases. You mentioned consumers, I'm introducing businesses, fraud checks. There's so much out there that it's exciting. And when I go back to the stats that Helen just mentioned, if you extrapolate the growth, this is a market that is growing at 800% per year on the API calls, doubling every 4 to 5 months. You need to have a plan and get involved like the VC companies and PE companies when something's growing 800% a year. And that's why I'm excited that we can try and pull this through to consumers, pull it through to businesses, but they won't see it as open banking. No, we don't sell open banking. We don't communicate open banking. Maybe we should talk about the education of open banking as another thing, but we can definitely draw it through to the consumer and the business to enjoy the benefits of open banking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting what you say there about that they wouldn't necessarily even know what was happening. I think that's an aspect of a lot of things in fintech that consumers don't really know, but they get all the benefits of it, which I think is really fascinating to think about, especially as we move forward with this incredible growth, like you just said. So that is fantastic. Going back to you then, Helen, is there anything you think that is holding the industry back? So we've heard of all this big growth. Do you think there's anything holding us back on open banking?
I think that's a great question. How I would frame it is that rather than, talking around that we need improved customer protection, and there's a piece around education, I would actually say just look at what Ed was saying about an 800% growth trajectory. This is an industry that is predominantly fueled by entrepreneurs and innovation. So if there is anything holding us back, I'm sure we will just jump that fence. It is that simple. What you have is an ecosystem where, I said it at the top of this panel, hats off to OBIE for putting the standards in place. If you look at where we are in terms of API calls and the maturity and the stability of those calls, okay, that has allowed us to get to that early, to move from the early adoption phase very, very quickly to be an established part of the payment infrastructure. So we've moved. We've removed a huge amount of the friction in the process. So if any more friction or challenges come, I'm actually convinced that we will jump the fences. So what do we have ahead of us then? We've got the OBIE consultation with UK Finance, and that's going to reshape OBIE. I don't think that's going to hold us back. I think that's a very adult conversation. We had a panel session with all the stakeholders around it at OBE. We had a campfire around that, and it really was a very mature conversation. We've then got the Wolford report coming out around buy now, pay later. There's all the APP stuff that the payments regulator, they're out with a consultation. You've got the FCA shout out, call out, whatever you want to call it. But you've got all this industry engagement now. So you have an ecosystem that is all pulling together to just to make it simpler for customers to do business, to get stuff done. And it's that fintech that is sort of energy and an open banking that is fueling the fintech growth, whether that be through funding accounts, e-commerce, bill payments. We've talked about making a donation, and I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a plug because you very generously carried our story around our own QR code, because we're all around open banking payments should be ubiquitous at OBE, and what better way to demonstrate that than our own QR code and encouraging people to make a charity donation. So I'm sure there are going to be hurdles, but we will just jump those fences. I am convinced of that. So I can give you a whole long list of things we need to address, but I don't think that's where we should be focused on. It's on where we are going and the innovation that we are all here to promote.
Fantastic, yeah. And then coming to you again, Craig. So I'd love to know what you thought about traditional payment methods. So is there still a place for them, or are we just moving forward with open banking and other payments like this?
Well, I think what open banking payments has given us is giving businesses and consumers more choices. Mm-hmm. And over time, they will make the choices and they will decide whether the traditional payment methods they use today are the ones they want. Now, some of these payment methods like cards, I think will be around for many, many years to come. They have some great use cases, whether it be contactless, going on to rapid transit, or using your card internationally, that are really much harder for open banking to address. Having said that, I think open banking is opening new doors. I think the one area where there's a really interesting question about traditional payment methods is in the whole space of direct debits and how you do recurring payments from consumers. We've got a really interesting coming together of events that could radically change the way the industry operates. We've got a direct debit platform that's hugely effective, hugely efficient, but is about 50 years old in terms of its design, 20 years old in its technology. And we've got a regulator, the payment systems regulator, who is really pressing the industry to rebuild a new platform for the next generation. But we've also got a really interesting proposition coming out of open banking called variable recurring payments, which is an open banking enabler, which if deployed properly with the right commercial models, could actually allow you to offer a real-time debit proposition in the future as an alternative to direct debit. So I think there's a really interesting sort of macro payments industry question for the next few years about what's the right way of meeting that need for somebody to make payments from their account on a regular basis, where you're not having to authorize each payment on as you go. I think there's huge opportunities there. And that's probably an area where we could see some traditional payment methods shifting away more quickly than you might see in other areas.
Yeah, fantastic. Then Ed, coming back to you, I'm really fascinated by the thing you mentioned just before about education surrounding open banking. And I think I was just wondering to get some of your thoughts on that, because I was actually speaking to my parents the other day. I was telling them that I was doing this webinar, and they're both like, what's open banking? I've never heard of that before, even though I know for a fact that they have both benefited from open banking and open banking payments. So do you think that there does need to be some more education on this?
I think there does, and there's a role for Bottom Line, for Craig Ordo and everybody actually to make sure we don't fall into that trap of talking our own language, like VRP and COP and all the acronyms that we bring in as this whole entrepreneur engine kickstarts. We've got to translate and get that message right. So sometimes I think back to about 18 months ago in the Netherlands with our dear friends in the Dutch fintech world, where they did a commercial TV advert and they got it wrong, and they put their hands up. We got it wrong. They had someone on the advert coming to your door at home and knocking on the door, and they were open banking to come and use your data and make your life better. And people thought, no, hang on, I don't want you to come see my data. It was positioned wrong. So I think some of the areas we've got to do is just focus on the pain points. What are the pain points that annoy the consumer or upset the consumer or the business? How do we remove those pain points by underneath using the open banking assets that are around. So I think the education is really about removing the pain points. And then there's a kind of, by the way, it's a safe, regulated, open banking delivery system underneath that is safe and affordable and long-term and exciting, because we have got some fantastic business cases, use cases coming through, and we're not yet promoting them, I don't think, well enough. I think we can give it more press so people get comfortable that this open banking thing, we can leave the professionals to do it, it's safe, and we can enjoy the benefits and solving of pain points. So yeah, something there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So just finally then, we are coming to the end of our time today, but I would love to get each of you's insights on what you think the future of the industry is going to be. Where do you think that the technology is going to take us? So I'd like to get a comment off each of you, but if we start with you, Helen, what do you think?
Gosh, okay. In a word, well, in 2 words, I'll say it's phenomenally exciting, okay, because we are open banking and we're moving to open finance, and that is into open data. And as Ed was just saying before, it's about sharing data securely, and it's about sharing relevant data, and that will make an absolute game changer. It truly is. And I'll just throw in one more stat. As I started with some stats, I'll try and sort of round up with them. In fact, a couple. There's the Bain report says that the growth of the embedded finance market, so that's where you have, an open banking fuels that. It really does fuel that market. By 2030, will be a whopping $7.3 trillion. That's $1 trillion. And open banking is all around, those transactions, those payments. Payments is the hero of open banking inside those apps. And we are using open banking more than most people know in a very simple, safe and secure way. And I just think that the future is phenomenally exciting.
Fantastic, thank you. And then Craig, your thoughts on the future of the industry?
Well, I think from a payments perspective and open banking, I think we're heading to ubiquity. Everybody will be doing it, but with invisibility, which is people will just be doing payments. They'll notice they're using their mobile banking app to do stuff. And I think the final one is simplicity. We have a world where things are getting more complicated for doing payments, whether it's adding in confirmation of pay slips, whether it's the much delayed strong customer authentication for credit card payments, that is making life much more frictionful, much more difficult for consumers. Open banking payments allow us to solve these problems at root cause, to present you with the person you're paying rather than ask you who you think you're paying and then check against it, to do confirmation simply using a fingerprint or a Face ID on your mobile banking app. So I think we can produce simplicity to make, in some respects, payments more invisible again, because we're filling a utility. But people don't choose to do payments. They choose to do payments because they're buying something or they're getting experience, and making those work smoothly, simply and safely without you having to think too much about it, I think is a real goal that open banking and the innovation from TPPs and the support from banks can really provide to consumers and businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. And then last but not least, Ed, where do you think this technology is taking us?
I think it becomes hugely adopted around the world, actually, and hopefully interoperable around the world. That's a bit of a buzzword, but some of the secret sauce here is interoperability across systems, and it's still too difficult to make payments from London to Ho Chi Minh City on the old correspondent banking networks. I heard the Bank of England lady quote 14 different steps. It's just crazy in 2021 to make these kind of payments, but to make it local to the UK. Hey, what wonderful news that the UK government have adopted it big time with the HMRC payments in open banking. That gives real gold standard backing to all of the investment over the last 3 years in open banking and getting it out there. So I think it's permanent. I sometimes quote that the genie's out the bottle. You can't get it back in. Once you digitalize and you speed up with open banking, it's only going to get simpler, quicker, faster. So I predict it's here to stay. I see the natural use of it from banking into finance, into data, as Helen's quoted. And so, yeah, let's solve more of the problems safely and securely. There's definitely cost to rip out of this system that takes time to change, but I think we've got it right on the UK approach, and let's see if we can export that and make good.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of today's webinar. I'd just like to thank the three of you so much. Helen, Ed, and Craig, thank you for joining me today and sharing your insights. It's been fascinating. I'm sure we could carry on talking for hours about this. And I also do want to say another big thank you to our online audience. Thank you so much again for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.
Thanks.